Hey, bird watchers, welcome again to another episode of the Shift Left podcast. In this episode, we're going to explore why localization should start at the very beginning of the content lifecycle, and that's at the point of authorship. Thus, this episode is called Shift Left, and if this was a movie, you'd be like pointing and saying, oh, they just said the name of the movie title in the movie. So yeah, the name of this episode is Shift Left. Joined by Stevan Relic from Unbabel. So you're going to share some insights on how this philosophy, and then in the pre-show, if you will, you're talking about many years ago about this concept, and we're still toiling with it. We're still battling with shift left all these years later. But before we get into that, before the show, your background was blurred. You had a blurry background.
Yeah.
Now, I've had calls with you before, and so I've seen how awesome your background is, and I thought unblur it. The world needs to see what is going on in Stevan's background here. Explain the collection and like what's your favorite piece. Just talk about like what's going on behind us.
So this is basically me. This is my, let's call it, office/man cave. This is, of course, the gaming setup. I do some streaming with some friends. And then, of course, this is my collection of figures. I don't collect for collection's sake. I pick up what I like. So you can see in the back end, you have the Batman side. So you have the 92 Batwing, the 92 Batmobile. I have some others to build. Those are Legos. I love Legos, so I just go and buy them. Sadly, I don't have enough time to sit down and create my own stuff. So what I'm doing is I pick up when I have distress time. I just pick up Legos, put them up for display. That's about it. Also, you don't see what's here. There's a bunch of other stuff in front of me, but yeah, in the back end, usually Marvel, DC. It's basically what I like. There are some pre-orders coming over. You have the messengers and the Japanese robot side, the Voltrons and the things like that. Gaming, Homeward, so on and so forth. And then there's the rig behind me. So that's basically it. It's taking time. Like some of those figures are from. So this one, if you can see it correctly, this one here is from 2011. That's from Arkham City, the second Batman Arkham game. There's some others that are older. You can see from my chair now. God of War is there for a while. There's a signed statue for God of War. Favorites, the three Iron Mans you see on the left, on top left, you can't really see what they are, but the one in the middle is actually Doctor Strange with the Iron Man armor, which was a concept.
I can see it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, it was a concept for the Endgame movie. They never put it in script, but then Sideshow, because they like to run with the concepts, picked it up and then created the Strange armor. It's basically called Iron Strange. But it was a real concept in the movie at some point that, Tony Stark leaves for the 5 years, so on and so forth, and then Strange is the one picking up, but they scrapped that idea.
Wow, that's funny.
Interestingly, though, that has happened in the comics, though. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a Voltron guy. Yeah, I kicked myself I had all these great things when I was growing up, and Lord knows where they ended up. It's like
but you either keep it or you don't, right? Like I'm pretty sure I have. So that is a door to a closet, and there's a lot of stuff there. I'm pretty sure I have an Atari 7200 there with pack. I never lost that, so it's there. It's just hidden away. I need to see if it still works. After 40 something, 38 years.
Yeah. Oh no, I used to rock my Atari, the NES, the original, Nintendo is just, connected up to my black and white TV in my room. Yeah.
Those were the days.
This is how far technology has come. But I think I think it's a great segue into talking about like even in our careers and our lifespans in this industry of how far technology's come and evolved, and the little teaser trailer I put out for this podcast, webcast, web series, whatever you want to call it, the idea of a podcast came from the iPod, and I was like, most people don't even have iPods anymore. I do. I got a drawer full of old technology here. Like I pull in, I think I have. Here's my flip phone, right? I still got my flip phone from my Motorola flip phone, Nokia flip phone from 1999 or something like that. So I mean, I got a drawer full of old tech. But of course, I've upgraded. I got my iPhone. I do those things, and I think that's kind of where we're at in this industry, right? Is there's still people with some old tech hanging around, infrastructure stuff that's probably bogging them down, and then we are continually to progress with the technology. And I guess it's a great question, great segue into just asking not just technology but processes, culture. Like
Yeah.
throughout your career, what have you seen kind of change? Hopefully for the better.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting start of it. Is a question. It's an interesting start of it because you're going exactly where we should be talking about today, and it's interesting because you say as technology advances, I still keep my phone, I still keep this. Yeah, so imagine that in an enterprise setup where it's not about I keep my phone, it's about there's so many changes I need to do that they're painful. So you always have then technology 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of adoption, and that for me is what's happening today. Like, how long has statistical machine translation been out, right? And then all of a sudden, it just came really, really into it around 2017. Google went neural, and then everybody's like, "Oh, this actually works a bit better." But it wasn't adopted right away. It took its while because, first adoption by translators. Is this really going to be good? Is this eroding my job, so on and so forth? And then adoption by companies, lack of trust. I don't want it. I want human translation. I want this. I want that. So move a couple of years. You have OpenAI comes out, then pushes. LLMs have been there for a while. It's just the usage, the product that was built around them, and then all of the expansion around that usage and the product. But then go back to exactly your example: startup companies that have no baggage and very agile process movement are very quick to adopt. Take larger enterprises, and I say baggage, it's years and years of processes that run in a very perfect way for that company to rack a very specific efficiency on ROI and a bunch of stuff. And then you come in and say, well, this is going to make it better. The first question is really how? Because right now, I'm literally shaving all that I need here. You need to show me how that's going to be better for my ROI, while at least telling me how big of an effort it is to put in. And this is where the headache is. Is it going to be better for ROI? Absolutely. How big of an effort do I need to put in? Usually tremendous, because you need to change processes internally. You need to educate people to do some stuff. There are people that are not going to like it. Like change management as it goes, right? And if we go down to tech, stacks, technology, uh, are you on cloud? Are you on-prem? What services are you using? So on and so forth. Infrastructure team, security, privacy. We're talking enterprise. Does it justify certification? Look at what we have today, LLM translations, but there's no ISO for it. So and a lot of companies are like, no, 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 I want you to do ISO slide. If I remember correctly, 18587. I want you to do MT. Like, okay, fine, but that's ago. That's 2017. We are in the LLM world. Yeah, but there's no ISO. Yeah, but that's how we do. So do you want to adapt there? So that's part of the challenge. It's for me, it's adoption always lags. And in between adoption and where the technology is, that's where this host of changes and processes and adaptation is where it's interesting.
Yeah, listen, and I mean, I think it's a great segue into talking about the main topic of the show, and the main topic is shifting left, and I definitely want your take on it. And
Mm-hmm.
first off, your original take on it, probably when you started thinking about what shifting left was,
Mm-hmm.
over a decade or 15 years ago, and then maybe your new take on what you think shift
Mm-hmm.
left could be because of the advent in AI and technology. Because I do think we have been in our industry for years saying about it's like, yeah, we're just accepting the fact that this is the content we need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking about
Mm-hmm.
how do we get content at its purest form, but now with AI, there might be something about not just getting content at its purest
Yeah.
form, but maybe something else.
Yeah. Again, very interesting question because I think the idea, the principle hasn't changed. I've been doing consulting for all my life, and this idea of, I mean, for any type of process, you need to look at the process as top as you can or as left as you want. Shift left is actually a development moniker, so to speak, to look at what happens upstream, what happens to the left of the process. So whatever you have downstream to the right of the process gets easier and easier. Same approach here, and that as a principle hasn't changed. What has changed is the ability and the tooling and the interoperability to make it faster, to make that adoption that I said before easier. As you said, when I was looking at it years and years ago, I had a customer that had a very unorganized stack. Let's paint the picture, right? Application localization, mobile application plus a web component, so website with members, and then native mobile apps, not the web on mobile, but actually native mobile apps for iOS and Android. Three different stacks, uh, a humongous amount of different teams doing and deploying into CI/CD environments, doing a bunch of different stuff. So a lot of teams trying to integrate all of it. So we're talking at scale. And then the challenge was, how do we make sure that all translations are the same across all three stacks, across all the structures? So way back when, it was the whole thing about, well, you could use a tool, you could adapt different frameworks for each one of the, depending on your dev environments. In this case was Android Studio, iOS, Xcode basically, and Angular, right? So you could adapt a framework for Angular that is very similar to what iOS is doing, and each one of those has their own structure. Android works on XML. To make the story short, the whole point was send it somewhere, get it translated, bring it back. It was interesting how the development actually, or the internationalization part of it, shift left, was exactly what's creating the challenges. Not down the line. Down the line, technically, you get it all framework in, string resources, although a bit different, are all in there. They replicate themselves through bases, all fine. The challenge starts at how each of the different stack teams or Scrum teams were creating their own content to begin with. Some of them weren't commenting on them. Some of them were getting ideas from different product managers that are different from the ones on the web, so on and so forth. So this is exactly the idea of shift left. It was difficult to rein that in, which is, in this case, this is our customer, right? So it's difficult to rein that in because it's a process ingrained in them. And then they pass on the burden to you as the localization company, telling you, oh, but you're translating wrongly, or you're not making it look the same across the board. And you still have some ways of doing that. You have translation memory, you have structures. Of course, there's tooling like phrase like localize that pick up the content directly from repos. So I'm not gonna go into that detail. There's solutions to this. What I'm pointing out is it has always been the same challenge. Even with that tooling, it's always like, okay, but if it's phrase, you need to connect to GitHub and you need the connector to do that, and so on and so forth. Also, Blackbird is a very good enabler of that type of interoperability, so on and so forth. But this is kind of, in a nutshell, the same challenge. What has changed, though, is you used to have one prime English content and then localize it into multiple languages. This is something that was interesting, I think, Lockwood 2023, actually, in October. There was a panel in Lockwood, and I asked a question. I was there just, with Unbabel. We had a stand, we're walking around, and I asked a question about, with the advent of AI, with the push into adaptability of AI, so on and so forth, when does it stop being a pure localization business? And when does it start being a generation of content business? When do I, and of course, I'm very high level now. There's a lot of complications here. I understand that, enterprise, so on and so forth. I've said this before, but when do I, let's say a very small company, stop saying, this is my English content, I want to translate into 10 languages, and say, this is my English content, I'm going to create similar content using AI into other 10 languages? It has different complications than translation, but it ends up being the very similar thing, because you need to trust that the AI is going to translate. Okay, you have a way to fine tune some of that creation of content. Absolutely, there are tools out there that fine tune it for you, so on and so forth. But you still, if you don't know the language, can't check it. So then we go into, are we still using the human factor? We are in a lot of places with localization. People are actually doing post-edited machine translation, which is a cheaper version, so on and so forth. So why is this not then post-editing of generated content in line with what I want as a customer? That might be a thing going forward. Is it the be-all, end-all of things? Not really. But looking at that shift left, and this is going to kind of give it a circle, is we used to say, create content with localization in mind, right? because you used to say, write, for example, if it's English prime content, write in general English, in global English, try for it to not deviate, try to not have very, hit it out of ballpark. Okay, how do I translate that in the UK where baseball is like, right? So with that in mind, you used to say create content, shift left, for localization in mind. Today, you would say, do I really need to do that? Because I can prompt the creation of content with what I want for that specific language. My only worry, and it should still be a worry, is the AI generating it to my standards and correctly to what I want? Not grammatically, that's gone out the window. Not linguistically correct. That's also, unless some hallucinations happen and things like that, has gone out the window. That's always usually going to be correct. It's more on, do I want it? Which also brings us to a different topic, which is the quality subjectiveness of, yeah, this is good, but I don't like it, so on and so forth. You know where I'm going. So this is my head around it. It's kind of a longer enveloping of it, but that's where I'm looking at it.
Yeah, listen, and I think that was the point I was going to make, and I'm glad you made it for me, so I didn't have to say it. But I'll repeat it. Is for years, yeah, it was this concept of, okay, yeah, create your content, not just so it can be translated or localized, but what's the end use of this? What's your database schema to make sure that you can handle RTL languages, or if you're building like PowerPoint presentations, even like, and you got like the boxes right around the English text, like, well, what happens when we do this in German? So at least like there was an education part of like thinking about what are you going to be doing with this content? And now I think that lesson, for the most part, I'm not going to say it's a completely like learned, but I think for the most part, people are now thinking with internationalization or localization in mind. For the
You would be
most part,
surprised.
yeah, I think that people are, maybe not for the most part, but I think we've made progress on that front.
Yeah,
But I think,
it's better.
I think to your point though, is now it's a different conversation to be having. Shift left is not just about getting content. If you're a localization company, it's not just like moving left in the process and trying to get content at its purest source, which we're going to demo that in Blackbird in a little bit. We're going to say that philosophy of, instead of getting a piece of a file or something that is, then you have to deal with it, how you can shift left and get content at the purest source. We'll cover that. That's an element of shifting left, but I think now it's what Bruno has been talking about. Bruno, our CEO, has been talking about, is that concurrent content creation is now leveraging AI to building content earlier on in the process, and then that being your starting points of the localization process is, okay, now you have, maybe it's even like 3 variants or 4 variants of content in different languages, and you're then having a professional go through the different versions, and maybe it's a harmonization of the content, but it is, instead of translation, it is more prompting, creating content to get the essence of what you're talking about earlier in the process. So it's fascinating. It really is.
And there's a period of adaptation, as I was saying before. That means a change in process, a shift in thinking. I've been a big proponent. Everybody that's spoken to me has heard this, me saying this is like a gospel. Like, basically, companies imagine a company that has years already in the market, right? You always have pillars in it. It can't work without a finance pillar. It needs to invoice and it needs to pay. That's it. So finance is always there. HR, mostly there. Let's not talk very raw startup. Let's say as soon as you start growing up, you will have an HR component because you need to take care of your people and there's some important things. So it is a pillar. Then you, depending on the product that you have, depending on what you're doing, is it's a service, it's a product, so on and so forth, you will have a product team, you will have a design team, you will have, of course, an IT team, or at least some type of technical setup that at least has everything on the cloud, but it's managing it for you. Where I'm going with this is each one of those will have their own budgets to deal with their own needs. Have you heard me saying anything about the localization department across the board? Because usually that's not your first thing, because you don't really need it, because depending on what you're doing, you're selling locally. Then all of a sudden you grow out of it, and then you're like, okay, now I need to go to other markets. Of course, there are places where you start global right away. That's fine. But what usually happens, let's say usually, is you start small, you sell in one language, and then at some point, because of growth, the need comes to, oh, now I need to do 10 languages, whatever, 5. Okay. But at that point, all of your processes are single language. You haven't thought of it. Again, going back to shift left. If you thought of it before, amazing. Kudos. I've been doing this for about 15 years. I have never, ever seen a company that comes over and says, we're ready. Everything is internationalized. It's all good. I just need to plug in somewhere so I can translate it. No, that's no, that's a no thing. So it's that period of adaptability that gets interesting, because what changed, as we said before, is you usually had to do for tech some internationalization of your content, so on and so forth. If it's just raw product content, databases, so on and so forth, you need to connect them somewhere. You need to know what you're picking up to be able to send it somewhere for translation, so on and so forth. Today, you might not need to do that. Today, you might need to pick up all of your content and create parallels in different languages that you agree with and then send. And that might, the price might be very similar generating it versus translating it. It's down to pure choice because it's very commoditized today. But it is still an interoperability challenge. Have you created all of the locales in the database that you need for your different versions? Have you decided what those versions are going to do? Have you decided on the functions of those locale versions, depending on, I'm being very generic here, depending on the product, depending on what you're setting up. So there is an adaptability component still out there that is shifting and it's moving. And it's interesting because it's moving at a very quick pace. Adoption is simpler today, I think. Knowledge of the need of that adoption, I don't think it's fully out there yet, because the challenge remains the same. The challenge remains, I am the product manager of this version of this side of the product, and all of a sudden I've been asked to, now I need to translate it. Usually you have nowhere to go. Usually it's you as the product manager understanding how to do it, where to do it, why, and then you call some people that you know, and then maybe you go on internet and find some things, and then you go how to do this. That's how it starts. And then all of a sudden somebody comes over and says, no, 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 that's not how it is. This is how it is. And then this is where the big conversation comes in. And this goes into, the needs, the expansion of LangOps conversation, the needs for a language department in a company. Yeah, I have never, again, for the last 10, 11 years, I've been saying like there needs to be a localization department, a LangOps department. There needs to be somebody managing it. The challenge is, as I said at the beginning, when do you create it? Because it's not your primordial need once you're starting a company. You create it always down the line, thus already going into technical depth in the part of internationalization, or going into product content depth, if you want to call it, on the part of how you write your content. And then at some point you have this need, and then you need to decide, what do I do? Putting that whole idea together is, before, the only chance you had was pick your content up. If it's very, for example, US, imagine somebody having a product in the Midwest and they write Midwest. And then you're like, I need that to go into UK English. Okay. Or, or I'm saying UK English with a purpose, because it is a bit even that more complicated to do that localization than translating it completely into Spanish. So this is where you go. You only had that choice. You had to reshape your content, restructure, so on. Today, you might have a choice where you pick that up and say, generate content akin to this in this language, give me something. And then you have a starter point. It's easier. Do you need to change processes? Do you need technical interoperability? Absolutely. It's still going to need to be there, depending on your stack and whatever you're doing.
And it'll be interesting to see how maybe organizations structure themselves, where localization might even sit in some of these organizations. Will it sit maybe with marketing or closer to the authors of content, as opposed to, sometimes you see localization teams being silos, like they are like the action heroes, like, okay, figure this out, and like, and run. Like, I wonder if there'll be a philosophical shift left of some of these companies where it's like, oh, they should be probably ingrained in the authoring or the marketing side of the processes, to make sure that they're not dealing with stuff on the back end still. So I think there'll be probably some we talk about like, digital transformation. I think that a lot of these companies that are looking into leveraging some, content creation in other languages will have to look at their organizational structure and probably
Yeah.
change that as well, So
Look at the people that do it really, really, really well and at scale. And I'm going to go with an extreme example, which is not applicable to the majority of the companies that are out there because they have the challenge that I'm mentioning. Look at Disney. How do they localize? They ingrained it into the pre-production process. You don't come out with Shrek in English and then translate it. You come out with Shrek, which has local versions. The same example why they escape certain Chinese censorship on certain images and certain structures, because it's ingrained in the pre-production process of the whole thing. You don't come out with the English version of a movie and then go and translate it. It's ingrained in no. This is the movie and it has its versions when it comes out, pre-production, and then after you've done the setup, recording everything, you're doing post-production to have all the versions out at the same time with their different needs. That is proper shift left. You're doing it at the creation of content stage. Netflix, very similar in their content structures. If you want to move away from the movie business, which other example? I'm not going to say that it's perfect, but which other example than Microsoft Office? Right? It is a tool created in pre-production with all the locales right away, because they learn and they hit all the problems other companies are hitting now. They learned and hit it very early in the Office deployment, way back in the ending of the 90s, beginning of the 2000s.
Yeah, I know people that worked on some of those Office projects back
Yeah.
then.
As I said, I'm not saying it's perfect. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, but I know that's a funny thing. I do think it does connect to what you're saying too. Is how some of these companies, their philosophies change as they scale and as they grow and as they go global. And you're right, there could be a company that starts up as a startup out in the Midwest, and they're
Yeah.
doing well, and then it's just all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're selling in Japan now.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do we do? So yeah, so if you could like give advice to, like a company out there that might be starting their journey in their company history
Yeah.
of how to avoid maybe some of these things, like what would be the advice that you would tell like a startup like that look even might never go global? Any hints or anything like that, just in case they go global?
I think at a very generic, high level look at it, every company usually has a value, a mission, and a statement. And missions are, goals or missions are always lofty. They're like, I want to be the best in the world. Okay, so if you put the word world in your mission statement, assume that at some point you need localization for it. So start thinking of it now. If you haven't thought of it that way and you're saying, I want to be the best seller in my region, that's also good. Then that's it. Now, at some point, you might overflow your region and now say, I want to be the best in the world. Great. As soon as that hits, start looking at the processes you need around this, because anything later is going to be a problem. And I understand, and I'm just going to very, very shortly here. I understand that at startup level, putting resources that you're not going to use right away, it's extremely difficult. So that's completely understandable. But that's why those challenges happen later. So shift left is even here. Like, start thinking of it very early. Put a skeleton in place. Understand that that's going to need to happen at some point. Buy your services, buy your on-premise cloud, buy your on-premise cloud. Sorry, buy your cloud, buy your setup. Set up your on-premise structure to allow for expansion, and in very specific cases to allow for the ease of use of localization structures later, be it generation, non-generation, so on and so forth. Now, of course, I just said something very generic that has ways and ways, methods and methods, but that's why they have consultants out there, they have Blackbird, they have way to ask, so on and so forth. That's what I would say.
But great piece of advice though. If your mission statement has the word world in it,
Yeah. You'll need to contend with the world at some point. Yeah.
It's like Pinky in the Brain. I will take over the world. Well, you better make sure that you can, take over
Yeah.
the world and know all the different languages and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway, I thought it'd be a good time to kind of just I'll share my screen. I'll walk through
Yeah.
Blackbird, and what I did was, I prepared kind of two birds that
Hmm.
that we can look at. One is, again, thinking of the getting content reactively in a way, a
Hmm.
customer logging into a customer, a vendor portal,
Yeah.
uploading a file, an actual file,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
kind of showing it that. Then I have a second bird that will show at least shifting left to get the content from the purest source, like from
Hmm.
the CMS itself. But then after that, we'll just have some fun, and I'll be a little puppet. You can be my puppeteer and tell me what you
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
want me
Man, let's
doing,
go
and
for it.
we'll
Sure.
kind of
Sure.
play
Yeah.
around. So let me share my screen, and we'll kind of go through that. Okay, great. So let's start with this first bird. And as
Hmm.
I mentioned, like I'll just walk you through it, is in this concept, we're imagining it's a customer, they've got a file that needs to be translated or numerous files that need to be translated. They got content. I
Yeah.
shouldn't even say files. They've got content
Yeah.
that needs to be translated, right? And so they log into a vendor portal for the vendor. And what this bird is doing right now is it's monitoring it, right? So when
Hmm.
that customer uploads a request, we're going to convert it into an order so it can be processed. We're going to get these files. We're going to send it out for translation, and then we're going to upload the file so the customer can then log back in and get it.
Yeah.
And again, we're putting some automation here already. It's nice, but this is kind of a very reactive approach to processing content, right?
And that
So,
that therein lies the challenge of the shift left, because you're asking the customer to have files, of course,
yes.
depending on their content, right? But let's assume this is product content from a website. The files are an
Mm-hmm.
export from somewhere that you might not need to have. So why do I have files? And this is the first conversation about that shift left. What are those files? How did you create them?
Exactly.
Why they happen to appear? So on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So this, at least this bird right here, kind of solves that problem, right? So you have a new product that has been created in your Shopify shop, and you need
Hmm.
that to be localized into the languages that you provide in your Shopify shop. So you can get the content from your product. And again, with Blackbird interoperability, you don't have to set
Yep.
it and forget it type thing. You get it. And then you can automatically translate it and put it back into Shopify. So it's
Yep.
there. The content is there. It's seamless. It's right there. And then on the back end, you need your billing metrics, you need your project created,
Yeah.
and so forth, is then you can create your project and do all the things. And then you can have like an audit trail. So you can pull the source file from, Shopify. So you can copy that here, what you got from the source. And you can also copy the final translated file. So you have your audit trail, you can do your billing and so forth. So this right here is already solved so many other problems, as you mentioned, making what's the file, what am I doing, what am I
Yeah.
processing, having a customer having to like leave their ecosystem to like log into a vendor portal. There's friction there, there's when it doesn't need to be. So like even thinking about this concept right here of traditional translation process,
Yep.
but shifting left to at least get the content from the start, right?
And what's interesting about this is that in no moment have we, until now that I'm going to do it, mentioned, well, you did say the word translation, but we haven't mentioned the translation end of it. We're just talking about how to pick up content and send it somewhere. Translation is just a byproduct that we're tacitly implying exists and will always be perfect. So what we're doing here is speaking about already upstream of the structure of, about how this, for example, in this case, how thinking of it this way eases your day-to-day work. And it also, going back to that adaptability, changes the approach. The first example you had is customer needs to export things, which is not as simple as people think, which is just click export and I'm happy, it gave me something. Some tools won't have the files that you need. Some translation services are not going to be able to handle the files that you send. If you want to translate with AI, you need a layer above it that actually understands what the file is, because it's very simple to say, disintegrate this and just give me the translatable content. That's easy. Yeah, but you need it back in the same file so you can put it back in the CMS. And
Right,
like, okay,
right.
then that doesn't work. So you need a
Yeah.
layer to handle that. So the first example, and there are companies out there that still run, but the majority still run with, I need a budget. Sorry, I need a quotation to fill in my budget. So I need to put this in the portal first to understand how much it's going to cost me so I can approve it. This is important because this goes back to, if a company doesn't have a translation team or a translation budget per se, they're usually picking and choosing from other budgets. It's hitting the marketing budget, it's hitting this. So you're leaving stuff on the to-do platter for the next quarter or next year, depending on your budget structure, because all of a sudden you need to translate, and that's been eating your budget. The shift left in this specific thinking is your second example, which is I'm going to do all for you automatically. What you need to take care of is budget handling. All the products that you've translated are here, all the structures are here, all the reporting is here, and I'm telling you, post facto, this is how you are. This is the credit. This is the thing. So if you, rather than I have $1,000 to spend, how much is this going to cost me? 998. Go. You go into I have 50K for the year, and these are my important things. So I'm going to select this and this and this and this. You've spent 35. How much more do you want to spend? You have control, you have structure without needing to go towards send file, receive file, transform file, not like files, so on and so forth. So exactly that in a process mentality. And interestingly, and I pointed out again, we haven't spoken of translation at all. This is a pure process about sending something somewhere and bringing it back.
Yeah, and to the point. Listen, and these are very quick demos, and I'll share my screen again. We can play around and do this. Like, yeah. So if you need the controls, if you are still functioning within a budget, yeah, okay. So instead of doing the automatic translation and send it back like I demoed here, instead you could create a quote in the vendor portal. But either way, it's not a human that has to go in and request a quote. It is the content. It is the process. It's someone living in their natural habitat.
Yes.
Interacting with their natural habitat, and then they need a quote, something can kind of happen. You can trigger these processes. You don't have to log into, especially with customers that might have a multi-vendor approach. It's tough. It's tough to, like, I don't remember the login for this one, or how to, which portal do I go to?
Absolutely. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the second option won't work. I'm saying that everybody should be using the second option because it makes them think ahead.
Yeah.
Now, if you're still focused and pushed to use the first version with the portal because you can't yet set up yourself to think ahead, there are automations with Blackbird there too that make it automatically, you not needing to download, click, send, blah, blah, blah. You get an estimation and you set it up correctly yourself. You just need to look at the numbers and say, I agree to this. That's it.
Yeah, so I mean, even if we looked at this one right now, where it's like I'm downloading the product and translating it, we could easily instead, using our vendor portal here, right? Create a quote instead. So then you can put a little like a checkpoint here, wait for quote approval, and then
that's it.
And then there you go, and then you can process from there. So you can still have those controls if you need them. And it's sometimes it is like baby steps left, right? Sometimes it isn't the giant leap all the way to the left that we're talking about. Sometimes you do need to take those baby steps, but knowing that you're empowered to do that because the technology is here. I feel like maybe we've been talking about it for a while, and I'm going to use a dirty word here, and Matthias, our VP of products, is probably going to slap me on the hand later. It's like, connector, right? I mean, we had connectors, and it was like that was the first kind of chance of like, oh well, at least we can start doing some of this stuff here. But everything is here, not just the orchestration tools like this that can do this, but you mentioned the AI, right? So what if we want to just add a step here in the process instead? Use OpenAI, or we can use Anthropic or something like that, right? And
do something about it. Exactly.
Yeah, like we can create content, or create transcription, create speech. We can do things here, or we can we have the Blackbird Repurpose tool, right?
That's what I wanted to go forward. The point about that puts all of this conversation that we have for the last 40 minutes into perspective, which is generate plus maybe translate and do something interesting with the content that you get back that you didn't have before. So yeah,
exactly. So you being able to be empowered to create new content from the start, and this is where I feel like companies, and if they can solve the budgetary things, and I think this does help solve the budgetary things, because if you can create more content like this, you're not restricted to just picking and choosing your favorites to get done. Like,
absolutely. And I mean, translation prices are lower because you're using AI. There's a lot of competition. And it's important then to note that the reality is, even if you use humans, it's shifting, it's changing. The whole point has always been KPI metrics. How much am I spending? Where am I spending it? Why am I spending it this way? How can I shift my metrics correctly? How can I control my metrics? Because the biggest challenge is translate this. Why? I don't know. We just need a translator. Or, well, the answer is I don't know. I went too far there. The answer is usually we just need it translated, right? And you're like, okay, but do we need all of it? Like all of the content to this language where we have only 5% of a install base and usage? Yeah, no, we need it all. Why? We're spending so much money here that could be spent elsewhere. Okay, how much money I'm spending? I don't know. Okay, but how much money are we spending elsewhere? I also don't know, because KPI and metrics, or the lack thereof of them. So that's the whole point. If you are able to remove the headaches of interoperability, manual management, and setup, and move that into, I'm going to give you a structure that if you create content correctly, you have proper KPI and metrics, and then you can make decisions on the basis of that data, that's the flow. You just need to get people to get there, which again, I've been in this for a while. It's not as easy as I just said it. That's the
Yeah.
big challenge. And it's amazing to see leadership teams that struggle with this. Like, they're amazing at taking decisions on the basis of data on anything else. Why are we not going to this market? Because that market is dead for us. Okay, but why are we going to this one? Because this is the run rate and this is the whatever the install base of our product there. Great. Okay, so let's do those same type of decisions with localization. What do you mean? With the content that you're translating, let's do, okay, where's the data? Half of the problem is there's no data or hasn't been properly picked up, because it's usually a random team picking the translation up, not looking at how much it costs. They just go and translate. And the other part is, why is translation so expensive? Not because translation is expensive, but because all of the underlying processes of having an integration, creating something, connecting, doing, finding consult, so on and so forth. So if we're able to eliminate that lofty goal, then it would be amazing. But yeah.
Yeah, I got one more point, and it's probably going to be its own separate episode, but you touched upon it. Is the metric-based decision making in determining what content even gets translated to begin with. So, I mean, you could think of a flow where you're either producing content in English and you're monitoring the metrics, Google Analytics or something like that, to see if it's getting a lot of hits, and it's like, oh yeah, this is getting a lot of attention. Let's now, as a result of this, translate the content. There's that, or it could be like you machine translate the content right away, so it's available in all these different languages, and then you monitor to see which pages are getting more hits, and then you might want to consider a human in the loop or additional steps. But with the advent of machine translation, quality estimation, automatic post editing, all these things, I think you have the flexibility to just get more content, language content, out in the world, and then use metrics to determine if you then need more human intervention or something like that after the fact. Like almost just like, I throw it out there and then monitor to see if it's getting, if you have a way to even evaluate if people are like downvoting things, I don't know, but if you have a way to then determine, okay, now let's, and I think that's going to give people a little bit more opportunity to generate more content and then still have the controls that they need to budget wise or whatever for more traditional translation or post editing translation.
And that's an interesting, very specific example. You said it on the website, Google Analytics, so on and so forth. For the Western world, where Google in search is still king, it's interesting now that Google has started de-ranking your whole site if you're trying to go multilingual but the pages are in English. It's not as before where it didn't care. Now it's actually de-ranking you. So this is exactly the point where AI translation or MT translation, depending on what you're using, is cheap enough that you could, take a gander and do it without any quality worries, just subjective, opinionated worries about my content. But to be honest, very little quality worries. Let's stop there, depending on your product. I'm not saying this for
it's not across the board.
It's not
regulatory
across the board.
stuff and absolutely.
Depending on the
sure.
content. But you could do it and then open the door to multiple markets that you weren't in or that weren't looking at what you have because you didn't have it translated. And now even Google, if you're using as a ranking for SEO, is pushing you by telling you, hey, if it's not translated, you're not ranked. You're actually negative going down. So yeah, it is the moment.
Yeah, very cool stuff. And Stevan, thank you again, spending so much time with me. I've taken away from your gaming. Any specific game you're into right now? Like,
Oh, you want to go there? So right now, I was playing a French game called Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I'm about to finish it. Amazing game. So if you're into gaming, you should try that. Very good story. Very out there. Very, very, very nice.
I like games that make me hate myself. So, like I play Cuphead because it's infuriating and makes me want to.
So you know the
It's a
type.
test of
Okay,
patience. It's a test of patience to see, like, its
got it.
repetitiveness. It's trying to like, and yeah, trying to not smash my controller. It really is this like Zen moment where it's
Trial
like
and error.
I'm
Yeah,
not gonna throw the controller. It's not
yeah.
gonna happen.
Okay, Cuphead. Fine. So you could try any Souls like. There's one coming out this week called Wuchang, Chinese game, first time developer. They say it's good. I'm not sure. I might try this weekend. So yeah.
All right, awesome. So we'll get more from localization. We'll get more video game tips next
Yep.
time Stevan is on. Again, appreciate it. And till next time, bird watchers, keep shifting left.
Thank you,
Later.
everyone. Bye.